Nithyanandam. So these days I feel very inspired to make videos in the hopes that my sharings and my stories will in return inspire you to also embark on a spiritual journey, and or if you're already on one, to inspire you to continue your seeking, because seeking is the only thing that you can never lose. And the story I want to share today in particular is about how Krishna manifested in my life. And it's been such a beautiful connection since then, and I've had many moments where the energy of Krishna filled me up and raised me to higher possibilities in terms of consciousness, and allowing me to see the world in such a high, like vibrant energy field. And so before December 2016, if I'm not mistaken, the only thing that I knew, I had heard of the word, the name Krishna, and but I didn't know anything else about it. I just associated it with people dressed in orange who singing Hare Krishna in the streets, and that's pretty much it. And so in December, it was my second time going to see Swamiji, and because Swamiji is an incarnation of pure consciousness, you can connect to him. He can be Mahadeva for you, he can be Shiva, he can be Krishna. It all depends on the connection that you have inside of yourself with the divine. And so this is the story how Krishna manifested into my life. So I remember that we were waiting. I was in the Adinam, and we were waiting for Swamiji to come. And we were outside, and I was talking with someone, and at that specific time I was very perplexed, very confused about a situation in my life, and I was seeking guidance, basically. And I think the thing is, when we go to the Adinam, because it's the highest possible energetic field in terms of consciousness, you will face all at some point or another, you will have to face the incompletions that have been like buried inside of you, and all these things throughout your life where you were just dismissive of, or just trying to escape from. When you're in such a high energetic field, because an incarnation is there, you will have to face all those moments. And when that happens, it can be emotionally difficult because we're so unstable, and our nervous systems are not strong enough, and it's all connected also, the physical body, the mind, the consciousness, everything is connected. And so when that moment comes, when one of your like really strong patterns shows its face, it can be very difficult. And but the reason why you want to face those is that facing is the only way for you to be completely liberated from them, and not just knowing ways to cope with what's happening inside of you, like anxiety, but just to remove completely like the root of the emotional happening, like it doesn't exist in your space anymore. And so the best way to do that is to go like in the Adinam and start doing also completion in your own life. So I was sitting with this person talking about this issue, and at some point we heard, my emotional state at the time was very depressed. I was going through a really hard time, and it was a very important decision in my life, and I felt stuck, like I didn't know what to do. I felt pressure. And so then we heard that Swamiji was coming, so I got up, and I walked a few meters away from the area where I was sitting. And as Swamiji was coming towards us, I looked down, and right at my feet was a peacock feather. And I picked it up. And I didn't, at the time, I didn't even know that peacock feathers were associated with Krishna. And I remember, telling my mom about this, what had happened, and, how I was talking about something that was causing me a lot of anxiety and pain, and how when Swamiji appeared, like from far, walking towards the area where I was sitting, I looked down and I saw this feather. And it's my mom who told me, peacock feather is associated with Krishna. And so that really stayed in me. And I actually kept the feather and I protected it in a bottle, so you can see it here. So it's well protected. And so this feather, there were no peacocks, actual living peacocks in the Adinam. There were no other feathers around. Like, that was the only peacock feather. And for me, it really was like a manifestation, like a materialization. And at the time, I didn't realize the impact that it would have in my life. And so during that program in December, I was facing a really, really destructive pattern. Like I said, I mentioned depression, even suicidal thoughts, a very dark pattern. And we all carry so much depression inside of us, and sometimes we're aware of it, sometimes it's just deeply buried. But yeah, when it comes out, you have to face it, and that's what was happening to me at that time. And as I was going through this pattern, all of a sudden I remember I started feeling completely empty, like I had lost all divine connection. And I remember during a darshan, I wrote to Swamiji and I told him, I feel like I lost everything. I feel like I lost my seeking. I lost my connection to the divine. And I was really in a dark place inside of myself. When I went back, came back to Montreal, all of us, this thought was always with me, and this feather, and the fact that Krishna had appeared to me in front of, in the form of this peacock feather, it stayed with me. And I realized that I had bought this book at the Adinam, which is the Bhagavad Gita Decoded. So during that specific program, I had bought this book without even knowing about the story between Krishna and Arjuna, and about the war that was going on in this book. And so this book is called the Bhagavad Gita Decoded. And so it's basically, and I'm reading here, the revival of the supreme secret of the Gita from the consciousness of the rare living incarnation, Paramahamsa Nithyananda, who embodies the very science and experience of the Gita. And basically the Mahabharata war, which is happening in the book, is a representation of life itself. And so specifically, and I'm reading here, the great war of Mahabharata is the fight between the positive and negative thought patterns of the mind, called the samkaras, or the root thought patterns, meaning the deep identity or the earliest memory you carry and create about you and others. Please understand, don't think you carry only the identity about you. You also carry an identity of the world inside you, and look at the world only through that. And that is what I call root thought pattern, the identity through which you see you and the world. And so I started reading this book, and the more I was reading, the more I started feeling so connected to this bond, this connection between Krishna and Arjuna. And it really, this story, like this connection really brought me back. Not that the seeking was gone for real, because as I said in the beginning, and Swamiji says it himself, of course, that seeking is the only thing that can never be lost. And it just started, I just started rising again, and that connection with the divine came back, became so strong. And I remember one particular moment when I went back to the Adinam last summer, and it was Krishna's Jayanti, birthday, and Swamiji was incarnating the energy of Krishna, and it was so powerful, so he was radiating so much. And I had already received the blessing of Kundalini awakening, but that specific time during satsang, I remember like my body was doing like moves, it was jumping so high, and it was doing moves that, had it not been Kundalini energy, I would have injured myself. It was to the point where the people behind me were actually worried. In the beginning, they were worried because my body was doing movements like going backwards. The crown of my head was touching the ground backwards, and a second later, like my body would be just jumping, like lifting itself up from the ground. And it's so hard to describe in words. It was really literally like accessing another dimension, and looking at the world through a different dimension. And I remember after the satsang, when I got up and we were dancing to celebrate Krishna's birthday, something had happened, and it was like my gaze was not the gaze that I knew. Like it wasn't my gaze. It was a divine gaze. And the reason why I say it is because the amount of love that I felt at that moment, that was pouring out of my being, was not measurable. And I remember I was looking around, and my face was completely transformed, and such like a huge smile, looking at everybody. Just I can't really explain it, but the way that I was looking at other people was completely different. And so that was one of the strongest, like most powerful moments that I've ever experienced in my life. I'll always remember. And I'm so grateful that I had this blessing of experiencing divine love, because it's a reference, it's a point of reference for me. Because we're so used, our way of describing love is so like small and so shallow and so just superficial, and love for us is always connected to expectations, and if you fulfill this, then you get my love. Like it's never pure, it's never complete, it's never really this unconditional ultimate love. And so I don't really know what to say after this, but it was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. And Krishna is always part of me, and I'm eternally grateful to have Swamiji in my life. Because when you get initiated by an incarnation, Cosmos will always support you. You can never fall. No matter what happens to you, no matter if the pattern that gets thrown in your face seems like unbearable, like you feel like you're gonna die from it, consciousness will always raise you back up. And consciousness never makes you face something that you do not have the power to face already. And I'm gonna stop there because I don't think there's anything worth saying after this. But I hope, like I said in the beginning, I hope that this sharing inspires you to develop that connection to the divine. And like I said, I mean, the best thing that can ever happen to someone is to be initiated by an incarnation. And Swamiji is a living incarnation. It's not like those enlightened masters that were there but that are not in the body anymore. He's there in the body, and that's like the fastest way for you to burn your karmas and to just get rid of all the garbage that you've been carrying and that's just ruining your life, destroying your relationships, like your relationship towards yourself and your relationships with other people. So thank you for listening, and I'll be back. Thank you. Nithyanandam.